Welcome back to another GTN Coaches Corner, where we answer your questions. On this week's show, how do I manage to eat enough? How do I fuel for those long training sessions? Why am I cramping in the pool? And how do you warm up for a race when you're stuck in a starting pen? We'll get to all those questions. If you have your own questions, down below this video, hashtag GTN Coaches Corner, and we could be answering it next week. Okay, straight into your questions. This one is from AstroTurd. Okay, if you say so. Hashtag GTN Coaches Corner. Any tips on how to actually manage to get enough energy in your diet? I've slowly increased my training to a level where my average energy consumption hovers around 3,700 calories per day, according to my Polar Watch. I have a pretty balanced diet according to general recommendations, but struggle to eat much more than 2,800 calories a day, as I just start getting that feeling of being too full. As a result of the 1,000-ish calorie deficit, I've started losing weight, even though I wouldn't want to, because it means I'm probably losing muscle mass. Any tips on how to actually manage to eat enough carbs without feeling sick? Should I just try to eat as often as much as possible every meal? Is it okay to supplement with sugary foods, even though long chain carbs are what is recommended to fill the diet? P.S. I'm a dirty cross-country skier in a runner's cyclist clothing, but love your channel for general endurance athlete content. Well, thanks for watching. Even if you're not a triathlete, maybe one day we'll get you to do a triathlon. Okay, this is not really a problem many people have, not managing to eat enough. Normally it's the opposite of finding they're eating too much, but we do understand, and this is actually not that uncommon a problem, when you do ramp up your endurance training, you start burning more and more calories throughout the day and throughout the week. Staying on top of your refueling can actually get hard. When you're at peak training and you're really burning a lot of calories, you suddenly start finding your weight is falling off and you're not eating enough, even though you feel like you're eating a decent, healthy meal, or a decent, healthy diet anyway. It's not that hard, though. This is kind of a problem of the same people who are building their endurance and getting into this habit of healthy eating and exercise and everything else, create these eating habits where they only eat healthy stuff, they only eat low calorie, high nutrient dense foods, and they eat lots of them, but they're low nutrient density. And so they get a lot of nutrients, but they're low calorie density. And so they're not getting that many calories from them. And they suddenly find that they can't keep up. And the simple solution is to eat the junk. And I know that sounds like really bad advice, but it isn't, as long as the first 3,000 or so calories that you eat are nutrient dense foods, those healthy things, those greens, those lean meats, etc. So you're getting all your macronutrients and you're getting all the micronutrients, all the nutrients and vitamins and minerals that you need. After that, it is simply about getting enough calories. And you can get that from anywhere. Obviously, the more healthy ones, the low cholesterol ones and stuff, are healthier. But even if you do have to go for the fried foods, the chips and things like that, go for it. You actually do need those calories, and you'll do more harm by not getting enough calories in your day when you're already thin and lean than you will by eating junk that's kind of got no nutrient value to it whatsoever. It's just calories. That's what you need once you've hit all those nutrient targets. So bear that in mind when you're choosing what you eat. Boost up on more healthy carbs like pastas and potatoes and those kind of things. You don't need to go the deep fried fatty things. You don't need to be eating ice creams and those kind of things. However, if that is all you can stomach at that point and you still need the calories, then go for it. Don't feel guilty about it. You've done the work to burn those calories, so eat it. It is far better than your body turning to breaking down proteins, for example, for energy, when protein should be used for muscle building, etc. So yeah, bear that in mind and be a little bit more flexible. If you are burning a lot of calories, don't be so hard on yourself. Next one from Christian Worth 6965, hashtag GTN Coaches Corner. I have a question regarding long training sessions. Let's say I plan a 4-hour session where the intensity is mixed. So I do some intervals early in the session and then go into zone 2 afterwards for the rest of the session. How would I fuel this? For pure zone 2, I would normally fuel at about 60 grams per hour. But for hard sessions, I go to 90 to 100 grams per hour. Would I, in a session above, fuel more in the beginning and then less when I go into zone 2? Or would I constantly fuel at 60 to 100 for the whole session? Or something in the middle, looking for optimal performance in the session and also optimal recovery after the session for the next session. Okay, so lower intensity sessions, zone 2, essentially most of your calorie needs can be met by fat oxidation, and you're not going to run out of fat, so you don't need to eat that much, and that's why you have a lower calorie carb intake on those lower intensity sessions. Higher intensity sessions, you're burning a lot more, you're going to go into calorie deficit if you're not fueling, but of course it's that much harder to actually take it in. So there's a couple of things at play here. If you're trying to train your body to be able to absorb lots of carbs, lots of calories, whilst you're exercising at high intensity, you do need to take lots of carbs whilst you're exercising. You need to train what you want to race. If you want to race at 90 to 100 grams, you need to practice that in training. And therefore, I would say, obviously, take the extra carbs in whilst you're pushing at the high intensity. If it is simply a case of wanting the best performance, unless you're doing a really, really long session, like a race, like an Ironman or half Ironman race, you don't need 90 to 100 grams of carbs to get you through that session without losing your energy, without bonking, without falling apart. Then you only need to supplement enough that you're not going into a massive hole and you can't do the next session properly. And then I'd probably say 60 or so grams is more than enough for your training load, for your training calorie intake, for high intensity and low intensity. In fact, you could even probably take it even lower at the low intensity because you'll burn a little bit more fat and you won't go into a hole. You won't go into a calorie deficit that needs to be refueled before your next session. With this user, he's clearly quite worried about how many calories he's taking, but I can tell you the difference between 60 and 90 grams of carbs per hour is not going to be in those early interval sessions of that session, the intervals of that session. It'll be in the last hour of the ride, or it'll be the last hour of your race. If you manage to take 90 to 100 grams per hour for the whole race, you won't fall apart so much towards the end of the race. But for training, if you're doing a 4-hour session, 60 grams an hour is more than enough to get you through that entire session and absolutely nail that session. Another thing to consider with this, though, is when you do high intensity, your body continues burning more calories per hour for a good few hours after a high intensity session, much more so than a low intensity session. So if you have done a high intensity session, you need to be that much more focused on your recovery calories and make sure you're getting in the right fuels for your recovery immediately afterwards, so that your body doesn't rely on its own stores to fill that gap, that deficit, when its basal metabolic rate is still significantly higher for a few hours after a high intensity session. So do bear that in mind. I hope that answered your question. Next one. Hard bread. Hashtag GTN Coaches Corner. Hi coaches, I've been struggling with cramping exclusively in the pool for the past year. Despite cycling long distances, over 200 kilometers, running over 2 hours without any issues, my pool sessions, typically around 45 minutes, are plagued by cramps. Before swimming, I usually have banana and some Haribos, 30 to 40 grams of carbs, and about 30 minutes before I sip an electrolyte drink during my session. However, my feet and calves cramp so badly that it feels like my feet are trying to ball up, making it difficult to walk or get out the pool. The cramps usually occur when I push off the wall while kicking, usually over the 1,000-meter mark. Okay, any advice would be appreciated. Okay, we actually just put out a video not too long ago about why do we cramp? And somewhat surprisingly, the answer is nobody really knows. There's a few theories. There's a neuromuscular theory that it's some kind of short circuit in your neuromuscular signaling to your muscles. And then there's the nutrition side of things, where it's an electrolyte imbalance and that your muscles just can't function properly because of a significant electrolyte imbalance. And the answer is it's probably both of those, sometimes both at the same time, sometimes one, sometimes at the other, but they all can cause cramps. For this particular athlete, I would say the issue is almost certainly neuromuscular. It's not nutrition when you're only 30, 40 minutes into a session. So it's almost certainly neuromuscular. Essentially, I think what is happening here, and this is quite common in the pool, you're holding your foot in an unnatural position. And you can actually demonstrate this quite easily. If I ask you to curl your toes down, or even if I just curl my hand like this in a slightly unnatural position for a while, and I hold it there, and I contract both sides, the agonist and antagonist muscles, and I hold it there for a while, and I'm contracting them both. They're pulling against each other, and your brain, one of them is telling the other antagonist muscle to relax, while that one's telling the other antagonist muscle to relax. And you kind of get a short circuit where one of them is just going to override and it's going to cramp. And you can do that if you just hold your hand like this, trying to contract both muscles for a while. I can guarantee you after a few minutes, it'll cramp. And it's the same with your foot. And this is probably what the question asker is doing in the pool. They're holding their foot in a kind of awkward position in between two, probably trying to keep that pointy toe so that they're hydrodynamic as possible, but it's not a relaxed pointy toe, probably because they don't have very flexible ankles, and so they're holding it in an unnatural position. Those muscles are working against themselves, and before long your arches are cramping or your calves are cramping from holding this unnatural position against your own muscles. What I suggest for this, firstly, stretch, get those lower legs really flexible so that you can hold your foot in a nice hydrodynamic position without pointing your toes really aggressively and without contracting all those muscles. Also, make sure you're warming up really well before, because again, what happens is you get in the water and you're kind of holding a foot that's not doing anything, but you're contracting the muscles in it. It's not warmed up, it's not getting a lot of blood flow, and so it cramps. So do a proper warm up beforehand, even if you walk to the pool instead of driving to the pool, can make a big difference to how those lower legs are feeling when you get in the water. It is almost certainly not a nutrition thing, so your Haribo and your electrolyte drink are probably not going to help anything. You need to warm up those muscles, strengthen those muscles. You can put your feet on towels and pull the towel towards you with your toes. That'll strengthen your arches a little bit, make them a bit more natural in that position, and then of course get your ankles more flexible so that they can be in that position but be relaxed as opposed to forcing them into that position. I hope that helps. Fingers crossed I got it, but like I said, nobody really knows what causes cramps, so I'll let myself off the hook if that wasn't the correct answer. Next one, Tom White 1431. Ask, hashtag GTN Coaches Corner. I've been watching replays of previous tries at Olympics, and now I'm watching Paris and noticed that the athletes are all using road bikes, even on a relatively flat course this time. Should I be ditching my TT bike, or is there some specific rule at Olympics that specifies only road bikes? Oh, well, this isn't really a Coaches Corner question, but I'll answer it anyway because it's quite interesting. The Olympic Games and the Olympic Distance World Triathlon Series is draft legal for the elites. That means that they're allowed to draft. But of course, if you're allowed to draft and you go down on aero bars, where your brakes are down here and not where your hands are, you're going to crash. So you're not allowed to use aero bars of any type whatsoever. They used to allow really short little aero bars on those road bikes so that you could, but again, it was taking your hands away from your brakes, and that is no longer permitted. You have to be on a road bike for those draft legal elite races. However, if you're doing non-drafting triathlons, which most age group triathlons are, there are some draft legal age group triathlons, but most of them are non-drafting, then you're definitely faster with your TT bike. So we would suggest don't get rid of your TT bike and get a road bike, unless you do have aspirations to go to Los Angeles Olympic Games, in which case you're going to have to train on your road bike and get used to it. I'm not sure whether that is you. If it is, good luck. But if not, keep your TT bike and just get really fast on that, because you need aerodynamics on a non-drafting race. Hope that answers your question, Tom. And then Domino Gersak asks, hashtag GTN Coaches Corner. I have a question about warm-up before the race, mostly runs. When I do a proper warm-up, it takes me about 20 minutes. There are several strides included, dynamic stretches, etc. I can feel and also see that my heart rate is at the end where it needs to be, not too low, but recovered from the strides back down. And the body feels well prepared. This works perfectly when I'm doing it in training. However, when racing, it gets really difficult because I have to move to the starting zone quite early and then just literally stand there for the next 10 to 15 minutes, and I feel absolutely cooled down. And although I'm trying to keep moving and jog in place, still it's like going from zero, and it takes a few kilometers to stabilize myself again. Do you think it's a problem, and do you have any tips, strategies for the warm-up routine before your race? Okay, this isn't actually as much of a problem as it sounds. You haven't cooled down. Your heart rate has gone down, but that's because your heart rate will go down as quickly as it can when you're not exercising. Your heart is as lazy as it gets. It will do the absolute bare minimum at all times. So unless you're racing 100, 200 meter, maybe a 400 meter sprint, and you need to be going all out pretty much immediately from the gun, you don't need your heart rate to be high or even raised when you actually start. What you do need is your muscles to be warmed up, supple, loose, with blood flowing through them. And that happens from that 15 to 20 minute warm-up, but its effects last for up to an hour after you've done that warm-up. So you don't need to stress too much about staying in a start pen and cooling down. You're not risking injury, and your muscles will be ready to go when that start gun does go, even if you've been standing still for 15 to 20 minutes stuck in a start pen. That's not too much of an issue. The only issue comes in judging your pace. Obviously, in the intervals, when you're doing that in warm-up and you're doing that in your training, you're able to get your heart rate to pretty close to where they're going to be for the intervals. And then when you start the intervals, you can feel exactly where it is. There isn't that lag where your heart rate has to catch up with your effort level. Whereas in a race, if you've been standing in the start pen for a while, there's that lag, and that's where it's hard to judge your pace and to get yourself back stabilized into your steady state. And that takes practice. Essentially, it is just learning what race pace feels like, not necessarily what your race heart rate is, so that you're looking at your watch to tell you what your pace is, rather what it feels like until your heart rate's got to that steady state. And then you can settle into the rhythm where you keep your heart rate to a certain zone. So that's the only difficulty, is that it's going to take a while for your heart rate to catch up. It's going to take a while for you to feel the right pace. And the solution to that is to simply get used to it. It's to do race pace intervals. It's to practice this starting immediately at a race pace, at a specific pace, and hold it and see whether you started too fast or too slow, and next time adjust it down a little bit or up a little bit, as the case may be, because that's the hard part of standing still before a warm-up. I hope that helped you. Don't worry, your race warm-up does work just fine, and you are warm even an hour after you did your race warm-up. You'll be absolutely fine on race day. If you have your own questions, down below this video, #GTN Coaches Corner. We could be answering it next week. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.